on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. One of the issues that I think surprised the left, they tried to dismiss it, Kamala on down, but it turned out that there were enough people that were either impacted by it or appreciated what it represents in terms of the thinking and the character of people who support the position that, say, for example, taxpayers should fund the gender reassignment surgeries of prison inmates, or that boys should be playing in girls' sports, or that children under the age of consent, but even under the age of 10, toddlers almost, should be in charge of making decisions that involve surgeries and their future health. Not just involved, being the drivers of said decisions, that parents should be cut out of any discussion about how their children identify, by what names they go in school. And if the parent is not affirming, then the parent could be subject to state targeting in a state like California.
Losing their children.
And yet, this is an example. You think that they are properly chastened by the election results? Some may be, but again, not the most prominent voices on the prominent platforms that amplify said prominent voices of the left, because this is where the critical mass is in that party. And it's not going to be very easy to dislodge for any on that side who would like to do so. Shermichael Singleton is a GOP operative, and he's a contributor on CNN. This is an exchange between Shermichael Singleton and Rabbi Jay Michelson over the trans issue, generally speaking, but you never really get to a discussion of the issue because Rabbi Jay Michelson is too busy serving as hall monitor for the vocabulary that's used to discuss the issue.
I think there are a lot of families out there who don't believe boys should play girls' sports.
They're not boys. I'm not going to listen to transphobia at this table. I am not going to listen to you call a trans girl a boy.
Are you going to allow me to finish my explanation?
When you use a word that's a slur, I'm going to interrupt. That's not how it is. They're not boys. They're not boys. They're not playing girls' softball. I'm not going to sit there and listen to that.
Let's reset for a second because, look, this is a really heated issue, right? And Shermichael, I know you. I know that you understand that people have different views on this. I think out of respect for Jay, let's try to talk about this in a way that is respectful.
Okay, so let me rephrase this since I'm being targeted here.
I don't, just to be clear, you are not being targeted.
But I am, but it's okay.
I'm specifically saying that I know that you are not intending to be transphobic.
He should know that I'm not. But he wants to sit here and bloviate.
I want to give you an opportunity.
So the way regular people interpret it,
that's not regular people. That's not regular people. There's no consensus that these are actually boys. This whole thing about trans girls is a canard. We're talking about a tiny, tiny sliver of the population.
That may be the
and we're
case,
using
but
that
my point in
to
terms
take
of
away
its
healthcare from thousands of people.
Hold on, just get to your point.
My point in terms of its effectiveness.
It doesn't even matter at that point because it just speaks. I mean, and that's a version of what the Kamala tried to do. It's a small fraction of this, and there are canards out there. It's being demagogued by people who traffic in hate and so on and so forth. Okay, but it is a nice illustration post-election of the total lack of self-reflection, which you can expect to continue unabated, and the intolerance for any sort of substantive discourse amid all of the phony baloney calls for unity and this and that and protecting the vulnerable and so on and so forth. They just so overplayed their hand, as we know. Now the question becomes, what do we and what does the Trump administration do in response? Well, during the campaign, as we talked about yesterday, now that his campaign videos are sort of resurfacing as the policy framing for the Trump administration. I mean, he spoke with complete moral clarity on the issue of what he will do to end gender identity politics driving medical decisions and decisions about parental rights in a school setting and so forth. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Madeleine Kearns, Associate Editor at the Free Press. Madeleine, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, as I said, and I'm sure as you've seen, Trump is very clear about this issue with respect to boys playing girls sports, with respect to parents being cut out of decisions involving their children, with respect to medical institutions that do surgeries on minor children of this sort. And, you know, this turned out to be, it seems to me, to Shermichael Singleton, although he wasn't able to get it out, and many others, including on the left, that this became a much bigger issue than they expected it to be.
Yeah, so I think Democrats had really banked on reproductive rights, so-called reproductive rights, being the big issue this election cycle. They made that clear in their messaging. They poured tons of money into that. But actually, abortion ended up being a bit of an electoral flop. People were persuaded, I think, by Trump's moderation on the issue. And in fact, half of the people who say abortion should be legal in most cases voted for Trump anyway. That's a group that Joe Biden won in 2020 by 38 points. So it goes to show that was clearly not the top issue on people's minds. But yeah, the transgender issue was a real winner, and Republicans saw its potential actually as early as 2022. They've been doing message testing on political ads, and they've found that it was really, really successful in moving swing voters. And so they spent $215 million this year on ads, and they were very pithy, they were very effective, very memorable. One of them ended with, Kamala Harris, she's for they, them, Trump's for you. And I think that really had in people's minds, the idea that Trump is really caring about the issues that they care about, whether it's immigration, inflation, not all this woke nonsense that's got nothing to do with everyday life.
Well, and the other thing, too, is even if you weren't sort of directly impacted by the gender identity politics, so many more Americans than they want to acknowledge were at least indirectly, because their kids go to schools where you're dealing with gentlemen like that rabbi who call you transphobic if you call a boy a boy. And, you know, I think it just strikes most Americans, and the polling suggests this, I know, as just Looney Tunes. And if you're adopting the Looney Tunes and then you're moralizing about the Looney Tunes position, that's a real turnoff.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that it's a slur to call boys boys is just ridiculous. And in fact, it's a rhetorical sleight of hand. It's a way of controlling the terms of the debate. Because, of course, if we start referring to biological males or men, whatever you want to call them, if we start referring to them as women, whether it's trans women or trans women are women, whatever it is, you kind of lose the debate, right? Because if they're women, then, well, why aren't they in women's sports? And the point
Right.
here is that this is not about gender identity. This is about sex. It's about anatomical sex, something we could all agree on until very recently. And it's not being mean. It's not being bigoted. It's just pointing out a simple fact, which is that men and women are different. Men have biological advantages, and so they should not be competing against women. This is basic stuff. And I think the reason that Trump was so successful on this is that he was able to promise to do things or to undo things that the Biden administration had done. So, for instance, the Biden's education department broadening of Title IX, that's the part of the Civil Rights Act that protects women in education, or at least it's supposed to. And Biden had collapsed the distinction between men and women, essentially requiring all schools receiving federal funds to admit biological males into women's private spaces and sports teams. And Trump said, we're gonna undo that. We're gonna go back to common sense. And he made the same sort of promises with the issue of medicalized gender transitions for minors.
The response on, you brought it up, of course, abortion, which the Democrats were banking so much on. So that hasn't changed either after the election in terms of what you're hearing. It's a lot of the sort of the model and scare stories about how do I tell my 12-year-old daughter that if she gets raped, she can't get an abortion. I mean, what a bizarre, sort of sick conversation to have. But this is California Representative Katie Porter.
So on election night, I went to pick up my daughter from water polo practice, and she's 12, and she got in the car and she was crying. And I said, did someone punch you? Like, water polo is a rough sport. I was like, did someone hit you? Did the coach yell at you? What happened? And she said, Mom, Trump won. Trump's going to win. And what if I get raped and I need to have an abortion? This is from a 12-year-old, my 12-year-old daughter. And so it was really a reminder of how scary this time is for people, and how important it is for Democrats to have strategies, both at the state level and the federal level, to make sure that we can continue to protect people's rights.
I mean, forget even that she's in California. Forget even that most states under Dobbs have rape and incest exceptions. I mean, just the nature of that messaging, Madeleine.
Yeah, I mean, if your 12-year-old is saying things like that, then clearly you need to be more careful about what you're saying around her, because that's not a organic thought for a child to have. And yeah, as you say, she's in California, and California has one of the most permissive abortion regimes in the whole country. You can really get an abortion basically all 3 trimesters, through various loopholes. So I think there is a lot of fear-mongering. The truth of the matter is, yes, support for abortion access has become more popular in the years since Dobbs, but not all that much has actually changed, in the sense that in blue states where most people are pro-choice, abortion is widely accessible, and at least 6 states have no gestational limit. And in red states where most people are pro-life, and that's significant, right? You can get the procedure only in a medical emergency and in other cases for rape and incest. So this is one of those issues where, like, everybody really is being given half a loaf, whichever side of the issue you're on. And Trump's clearly seen this as a political opportunity to say, look, I know everyone's unhappy, but we're going to leave this to the states. This is democracy. This is how this works out. And I think for most voters in this election, who, as I say, most voters are not single-issue voters on the life issue, most were satisfied with that and thought, yep, that's fair enough. And of course, people can vote with their feet, and if they really hate their state's pro-life laws, they can always move to a more pro-choice state.
Yeah, but a lot of states, too, that went for Trump also passed abortion members. Like in Missouri, they passed Proposition 3, which allows abortion up to 24 weeks. So states have been moving on this. Do you think that this is going to continue to be an issue, though, say for the midterms and again in 2028? Is it ever going to go away?
Yeah, it's not going to go away. I mean, I think what you've noticed is that there's been a change in strategy on the pro-life side. So, for instance, if you take Nebraska, which didn't go the full hog, didn't say we're going to ban abortion in all cases. They had a 12-week limit, and that was actually successful. And I think what we've learned here from these ballot referenda is if you give the American people the choice between a completely abortion maximalist policy, which is that you can have an abortion for any reason all 9 months, it's guaranteed, versus you can have no abortion ever except for a medical emergency, they will choose the pro-choice extreme position, not the pro-life extreme position. And so obviously I think people are going to have to learn how to strategize in a way that people will respond to and people will find persuasive. And we're already seeing that. I mean, I think the fact that Florida has this 6-week limit, but then it also does have exceptions later in pregnancy. It's a 15-week limit for various exceptions. That is the way to go, is to be incrementalist on the issue instead of absolutist.
Madeleine Kearns, Associate Editor at the Free Press. Madeleine, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Congratulations to President-elect Trump, the most unlikely figure in American history in many a generation, and one who will be fascinating biographers and historians for decades and decades to come. If you are shocked, blame legacy media and the deeply dysfunctional blue bubble, which Team Trump should absolutely ignore. Wednesday morning indeed was Morning in America.